Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us again virtually for the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Blockchain, one of our evidence sessions on interoperability and scalability in emerging standards and policies. Some very interesting guests this evening, some presentations, and hopefully we'll be able to take a few questions. Again, I would just ask you to make sure if you've got questions, you try and put them in the chat, and if we can't answer them virtually, we will. If we can't, we'll get back to you at some point tonight as well. But before we proceed, I'd like to also welcome the Chief Executive Officer of the Big Innovation Centre, Birgitte Andersen. And Birgitte, I'm going to hand over to you for a moment.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. This is our first evidence session for 2021, and I hope that you have all joined our APPG Blockchain Pavilion, which is our new open project social media platform, where you can hear and see about all our videos and publications and events, and you can set up your free account, or you can become a member of our group. I also want to say tonight's meeting has turned out to be extremely popular. Just within 30 minutes to an hour of posting it on Twitter, we had about 140 likes and 60 retweets. And of course, this is very much due to our amazing speakers, or I would call them market disruptors, which Docherty-Hughes will introduce very soon. But the retweets is also due to the urgency of tonight's topic, and that's very relevant. Interoperability between blockchain platforms is relevant for competition policies, and this is totally dependent upon future standard setting, and the same can be said about scalability. So tonight's meeting is about a lot more than blockchain technology. It's about the shaping of an entire industry and its winners, and that's why it's so popular. And I look forward to tonight, and I will now hand back to the chair.
Birgitte, thank you, and yet absolutely delighted to see that so many people are joining us. Forgive me, our first guest this evening is Tyler Welmans from Deloitte UK, who's their blockchain lead, spent 10 years in the industry across legal, telco, media and FSI environments during joining Deloitte in 2012. And Tyler is passionate about emerging and disruptive technologies, particularly in trends that can positively impact society. And without further ado, Tyler, over to you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Martin, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. So as you said, I've been with Deloitte, I think, for a number of years now, working in the large tech sort of enterprise space, but our focus equally encompasses emerging, disruptive and much smaller organizations. We cover organizations and indeed sort of markets involving cryptocurrency and digital assets, as much as we do large enterprise sort of corporate environments that focus more on the enterprise or permissioned blockchain networks. So it's a pleasure to be here and give a bit of perspective on interoperability, some of the challenges that we see in the industry around interoperability, maybe some thoughts on what can be done or what's making a positive difference. But I wanted to start by saying, it's true, we continue to see the development of new and very exciting blockchain networks. We are seeing new networks launching, both on the public and the decentralized side of the spectrum, as well as the introduction of new private and sort of corporate distributed ledgers. Some of those ledgers enable digital asset exchange and related sort of use cases or processes involving digital assets. Others focus more on the secure exchange of business information. Some decentralized, others accessible only to permitted members with access control and often smaller numbers of nodes. So across that landscape, the interoperability needs that we see differ, and they can vary quite considerably. Within networks that are used to transfer digital assets or to secure and allow custody and exchange of digital assets, from cryptocurrencies through in time, we suspect, to central bank digital currencies. There can be a focus and a need for asset interoperability, asset portability, the ability to extract or to move an asset from one network to another, or indeed the ability to initiate a transaction which may begin in one network but also trigger events in another network. Enterprise blockchain networks may be more interested in interoperability of other kinds. For example, the ability to receive a signal or an update from a sensor, which is in a crate or a shipping container, and which may need to communicate with multiple supply chain distributed ledgers. So a variety of different needs. And similarly, when we talk about scale, there are a number, the scaling considerations, again, vary quite considerably. We see many different networks, particularly on the public and in the decentralized space, are reaching, or in some cases experiencing, strain and difficulty in coping with the demand, and the number of transactions that they support, generally speaking, is lower than can be processed within a private enterprise DLT network. In terms of the other kinds of interoperability that we see, and Deloitte authored a paper in conjunction with the World Economic Forum last year, so describing the types of interoperability need that we see. It goes quite far beyond just technical interoperability, and the need for interoperability in the business domain and potentially in the legal domain and many other domains beyond purely sort of technical connectivity can be as important, if not more important. I've been involved in projects, for example, in the commodities or energy supply chain industry, where one of the barriers to interoperability was the fact that different organizations had different names for products or different names for some of the physical commodities involved. So as much as the technical challenges are real, I think when it comes to what can government do and where can some of the bottlenecks be unblocked, I think taking some of the bigger picture items like digital assets and like digital identity, we already see government doing a huge amount in terms of running consultation with industry, inviting feedback, and increasingly, as we've seen over the last few weeks with the launch of the UK Digital Identity and Attributes Framework, government is responding to feedback from both industry and from many corners of society, and providing guidance back out to industry in the form of policy and potentially in time regulation. And the net effect of some of that guidance will ultimately be to enable greater adoption and interoperability of solutions in the marketplace that incorporate digital identity. A number of those will use that digital identity to connect with blockchain platforms and begin to unlock more efficiency and sort of cut out some of the complexity in how people get access into blockchain platforms in the first place. So it's an example there of actually something that starts relatively abstract, ultimately making a difference to how blockchain evolves in the UK and beyond. And in the wider environment, the European Union, for example, we see some very exciting projects, again with public and private sector partnership working, helping to bring us towards what may be common standards and common infrastructure. So I'd say there are many challenges. There is good progress being made against them. Many domains or many types of challenges, but generally speaking, government can play a very important role in providing the governance and supporting the the broader formation of industry standards. So I think with that, I'll stop there, but thank you very much for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Tyler, and can I thank you for twice, because you've finished early, so that allows me then to kind of maybe pose a question for when we go back into the Q&A, because I think you're right about the role of government and the role of legislators. It's not just the government; it's all the parliamentarians, and where we come in terms of the regulation of frameworks to improve interoperability, not just the business sector, but also in the public sphere and also legally. And I think that kind of certainly does raise some challenges for my colleagues in Parliament to get a better grasp of the impact of the technology itself and how it will change lives. Thank you for that. We're going to move on now, because we'll come back, I hope you don't mind, to a Q&A, to Navin Ramachandran, who's a member of Board of Directors of the IOTA Foundation. He's also a radio consultant, a radiologist at the University of London Hospital. It might not look like it, but I believe that is where he is calling us from tonight. He's practicing a medical doctor in healthcare research and took the lead of IOTA's e-health focused activities. Navin, if we could go over to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure to speak here. These are some of my pet topics, so it's very much a pleasure to speak about it, because I think these are fundamental issues that we need to tackle. So I'm going to concentrate mainly on scalability, but I think first a nod to interoperability, because that's how I came into this space. So I was a healthcare researcher looking at how you share data between institutions and looking at how you secure that data. And that's the crux of interoperability. So when it comes to interoperability, unfortunately, I don't have answers. I only have questions for you. So what do we mean by interoperability, and what stops it happening? Is it a technical limitation, or is it a more human factor? And I put to you that it's more a human factor, because ultimately interoperability is about passing data and then understanding it and acting on it. And me just sending you an email is interoperating with you. So we do interoperate, but you being able to read it is one thing. Can a computer read it and make sense of it? And can a computer read it, make sense of it, and act on it? Those are different levels. And what we're seeing in lots of industries is that the interoperability happens at a very basic level. And that tends to happen when you have old industries digitizing and trying to catch up. I think what Tyler hit on is actually really good use cases. Things like identity are very good because they're new technologies. And that means there are no prior standards. People don't have systems that they've built a long time ago that they need to adapt. So initiatives to set up interoperable standards are always great at this point, but not in isolation. I think not just as the UK, because there's about 9 or 10 different initiatives around the world working on different standards for all of these. Unfortunately, sometimes we say that blockchain makes this easier and it's the answer, but I think actually it can make it harder, because it's already hard enough for companies to interface. It's quite hard to share data between hospitals. If I add the complexity of a blockchain on top, that can make it difficult, especially to share legacy data, because you don't have to just think about how the different systems at each hospital work. You now have to start thinking about tokenomics, mining incentives, escrow, things like that, because what I've described so far is the sharing of data, and the sharing of data is easy, relatively, because I can take a copy of my data and hand it over to another chain, and they've understood it and acted on it. Value and tokens are harder, because as we've hit on before, if I send a token over to the other network, I'm no longer allowed to use it on mine. So there has to be some kind of escrow agency as well, some kind of escrow function that handles that. So I think there's a lot to be worked on, and I think it's very early on in the process. There will be standards bodies that get involved. So we work with eClass and the Object Management Group on some things. The risk we always face is that if there are existing standards, building a new one, like the cartoon shows, you build a new standard and you just have N+1 standards and no one uses it. So I think it's coordination of multiple governments and interested parties across the world, especially at an early stage in new technologies, that will make a difference. The one bit of caution I have with the whole of interoperability in DLT in particular is the concept that we may have an interoperability chain which will act as a hub for everything. This may work brilliantly, but the issue is that are we just replacing one middleman for another? And I think that's a question that is more philosophical and we'll have to tackle. But that's it. Those are my questions about interoperability. Now to the stuff I really like, which is scalability. Go on up. Here you go. So when you get to scalability, to understand it, I think you have to kind of understand how blockchain itself works and what is the bottleneck. So as it stands right now, the concept of the blockchain are there are these blocks that are processed one by one by one. Each block contains information that's processed, and you can change the amount of data in each block, that's called the block size, or you can change the block time, which means how regularly these are processed. And it tends to be a balance between the two to get a secure system. The issue is that whenever you have a system that works in serial like this, one, then the next, it will always be slow. There'll always be bottlenecks. So we see that in more modern data processing, where the old serial data processing doesn't happen anymore. So if you look at Twitter, Google, Facebook, they're running parallel computation systems where you have databases that don't rely on everyone seeing the same thing at the same time. That's the main issue. For blockchain to work, everyone has to know the current state of the ledger, what transactions are valid, then they all act together, and then they move to the next transaction. But that means you have to coordinate for all the miners in the world or in the network to agree on that state to move to the next one. That's why, so we're going to talk slightly about the approaches we've taken. So we've moved slightly away from the blockchain towards a directed acyclic graph, which allows you to process things in parallel. It also means that everyone doesn't need to know what everyone is or agree about everything at the same time. So what we could have is a system where, say, UK transactions happen with a local agreement, French transactions happen with another one, US transactions happen with another one, and locally that works, and over time, we all agree on what the state actually is. That's called eventual consistency, and that's what's used in big data platforms. It makes the whole process much more complicated, but I think it's something we need to do because that's the limit to scalability we're seeing. When we can have that system that allows you to have different views of the global state in different countries, then you can shard. That means we can now start doing stuff slightly differently, which is very useful. The other concept that I think people have to understand is that these chains don't just deal with value transactions or just data, they execute contracts. So smart contracts are automatically running contracts that run in the background, but they rely on the same ledger and they send transactions themselves. So if a ledger can only handle 7 to 15 transactions a second, and now, as well as people trying to send money, you have people executing contracts, which uses up the space, you end up halting the network. And you see that in many ways. And this is the next slide we're going to talk about. But how we're approaching it is to say, look, not just running all the contracts at level 1, which is a base ledger, but to run it off chain in another system and then deposit the proofs back into the main ledger. So we're using level 2 smart contracts, which isn't unique to us, but I think what is unique is to say that we're approaching the limits from both level 1 and level 2. The next slide is very important because I think this is the end point and actually what limits scalability of use, what stops people taking this technology and running with it. And to understand that, I think we need to understand what miners and what role miners play in the network. So miners are the validators in the network. They act in consensus as a group to say what is valid and what isn't, which is a very valuable service. But how do you, when you have that service, you need to reward these miners. And with the need for the reward comes the need for tokens. And we've seen from personal experience that many corporate entities aren't able to hold cryptocurrency tokens in order to partake in a network. So if you have to hold and send cryptocurrency tokens to partake in a network, I think it becomes problematic. What happens when you hit the limits of scalability? We're seeing this right now. So the nice purple graph in the top right-hand corner shows what's happened to the Ethereum price as it's hit the limits of scalability. It's gone from a few cents to $30 per transaction. That was yesterday. And you can see from the graph as well, it's not just the increasing the rise of it, it's the volatility, which means that businesses can't plan their costs, which makes things a lot more difficult. But this isn't a bug, it's a feature of the system. So these kind of systems have limited scalability, which means when you reach that limit of scalability, the only way to slow people down is to actually put the fees right up. That is a mechanism that works for the miners and the network, but may not be good for the rest of the world. It also means that the miners who are reliant on the fees can end up blocking upgrades, because if an upgrade to the network, which can help industry as a whole, requires a slight lowering of fees, the miners who vote whether they take that upgrade on or not can block it. And we've seen that multiple times. So progression of the network can be blocked by having this kind of system. The other big thing that's stopping adoption is energy. And this is only really applies to proof of work chains that do heavy computations to decide who get the fees. So a good example is Bitcoin. And in the middle of the page, I've given an excerpt from an article recently, which is quite shocking. So the Bitcoin energy usage now is more than the combined usage of Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and Apple, which is very surprising. I was very surprised at that. And again, this is not a bug, it's a feature of the network. The network relies on computation to secure the network. So if you own 51% of the network computation, you can attack the network. If your coin isn't worth that much, not so much of an issue, because you don't need that much energy to secure it. But as the price of some of these assets rise, the honeypot to attack the network gets more and more attractive. So what you end up seeing is, as the price rises, the energy required to secure the network rises. So this is something that the end goal, as someone quoted it before, was that you would need to control 51% of all the energy in the universe to secure a network like this. That's the end point, but obviously you'll never reach there. But that's something we can't allow. Moreover, you also have the waste from systems. So when you have these specialist computational systems that require mining rigs, specialized equipment, they become defunct after a while. And the Bitcoin network currently, the e-waste is equivalent to what Luxembourg throws in the trash every year, which is ridiculous. Also, the silicon that's being used in there can be put to other uses. So there's a silicon shortage right now affecting the automotive industry. And a lot of that comes from this. From the computing side, lots of gamers can't get graphics cards exactly for the same reason. But this tends to have knock-on effects. So what I've been trying to do in the last few years is, and actually that's why I got into IOTA in the first instance, is that what attracted me was it removed the concept of miners and fees. You don't need the token or fees to use the network. And that's how I first used it for medical uses. The energy cost is minimal. So the upgrade we're about to do, you can run 450 million IOTA transactions in the energy required for one current Bitcoin transaction. And the hardware you use is standard. So once it's not used for that, it can be reused for something else. I think, well, I'm not going to say that we are the answer to everything. I think there'll be multiple solutions out there, but I think having a thought about these kind of things, which is not just scalability of the platform, but sustainability and how it impacts the world and its resources is very important. Thank you very much.
Navin, thank you so much for that. And can I pose a couple of questions from me before we move on to our next speaker, especially around e-waste and the production of e-waste through systems, critically as we move up to COP26, actually here in Glasgow, hopefully this year, because I know that President Biden in the United States is very much pushing on the climate emergency, and I don't think it'll be long before the eye crosses from the traditional producers of waste to the more modern take, especially on e-waste, and there really needs to be a concern about that, as well as how do we maintain peer-to-peer trust in these new types of blockchains. So thank you very much for that. We're heading on to Luke Riley, who's the Head of Innovation at Quant Network. Leads the Research and Development Group, which utilises cross-DLT standardisation. Previously at King's College London, we developed their DLT online module and had a core role in the EPSRC DLT funded projects for voting system and consensus protocol development. So Luke, can I hand over to you?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here to present evidence today. When I heard you introduce me, I realized it was quite a long introduction that I sent over, but there you go.
I cut it, don't worry, it could have been longer.
Anyway, yeah, so our company, Quant Network, that I'm representing today, we provide interoperability solutions for organizations to connect to one or more distributed ledger technologies and related technologies. So I'll go straight into it, and I'm going to start with actually our recommendation here. Okay. Yes, so our headline recommendation is that the UK government should start to move towards establishing a UK blockchain services network for domestic services usage and also international trade purposes. We are starting to see blockchain services networks at a national and multinational level developing around the world. But the UK, they have a great digital services sector, and we should be utilizing this and helping them as soon as possible. We should be leading with blockchain services networks. So what exactly is this? If you look to my diagram at the bottom of the slide, you can see that there can be commercial apps, government departmental apps, academic apps, all integrated to a DLT API gateway. This is one of the categories of established by the World Economic Forum for interoperability. This is actually the interoperability method that we use at Quant. And what is that exactly? That is a traditional API server, and connected to multiple resources underneath, where some of those resources are distributed ledger networks. Also, you can have related technologies there and possibly other apps as you build up the API system. So there's many types of applications that can be used on top of a blockchain services network. So you can think of high-level ones like central bank digital currencies, payments within the nation, citizen services, identity-based. If we allow other nations or other entities onto the network, we can start to have international trade applications, cross-border, and things like that. So we can make it simple for all organizations to connect to any type of distributed ledger using the same interaction method with the same API endpoints, but also using the same data objects on request and the same data objects in response. This can be a very powerful system. We're going to get over the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk you through why this is and would be very powerful. So why is blockchain and distributed ledger interoperability even a question? That is because distributed ledgers themselves are designed to be data silos. If you have data or smart contracts on a distributed ledger that natively reaching out to another technology resource and coming back with a response, if that reach out request occurs on different nodes of the network at different time, you're going to end up with a system where every node on your network has inconsistent data. So to get around that problem, they were made as data silos, and they have restricted methods to interact with other technologies. So then you might have the question of why would we want to interact between distributed ledgers? And there's many reasons. There's different features provided by different distributed ledger technologies. There might already be a decentralized app on one network and you might want to put an app on a different network, and you might want these two to talk together. We might be developing an app that actually connects to different consortium networks of the same domain, like supply chain, for instance, but you might be connecting to two different consortium networks based on two different technologies. And we also might think that even if we deploy an app onto one chain, we might want to be able to migrate it later. But interoperability is very difficult. And there's many reasons why. The main reason is keeping data consistent between two networks when you don't have a cross-network consensus protocol. But there's others related issues. You might have different permission systems and different networks. different storage architectures, different types of smart contracts. All these things make the data translation and interaction a lot more complex. But with a blockchain services network, we can smooth the integration of these technologies and we can minimize the complexity of the interoperability. So this is my interoperability slide. The next slide, I talk about scalability, but not from a technical perspective, actually from a development perspective. This is the fourth process step that any organization will go through to develop an app on a distributed ledger. They will first, well, and I just want to clarify before I go through that blockchain services network can help speed up the process or even eliminate aspects of most of these steps should the organization be happy to use a network with sort of a consortium trust model. So step one, an organization will have to try and identify the technology to use and the networks and the related network to use. This is a time-intensive task or an expensive task, and lots of organizations may give up now at this stage. If they realize they need a permission network, but they don't have the organizational aspects to build the necessary consortium, they might not even continue and forget about blockchain technology for now. But with an established blockchain services network, they will have possible networks to connect to fairly immediately. Second step, after you identify the network, you now need to start building your on-chain aspects, your smart contracts, the type of transactions you want to do. This is also time intensive. It requires very specialist skills, which can be extremely costly to find. But with a blockchain services network, if you have the correct services in your API, you can smooth this process. You can provide standard smart contracts that can be deployed, standard ways to invoke and use smart contracts on multiple technologies with the same interface. And related wise, there's also going to, when you're developing your app, you're also going to have normal application aspects like your database, your UIs. These can also be embedded, well, at least the database, the file stores can also be embedded into a national blockchain network if required. The final point I wanted to make is currently the interaction to every type of node is very bespoke. This also takes time to understand. You need to have different libraries for different technologies. With an API gateway interface into these different technologies, you can cut down on the complexity of using these bespoke libraries in different parts of your application. So hopefully that shows you why a blockchain services network can be very important. And we recommend at Quant to build this type of thing with interoperability in mind from day one, because different technologies can provide different features, and also build it in a way that's standardized from day one, using the emerging standards such as the one being developed by in ISO Technical Committee 307, which regards blockchain technology and was co-established by our CEO. And I'm aware I might be running out of time, so I just very quickly skim over the last slide. I wanted to highlight that even if you're building applications for multiple distributed ledger technologies, of which some applications need to be built for, you now have even more steps involved than the previous slide. You now have to evaluate all the different types of interoperability categories that are available to you, which one is appropriate for your organization, and then you need to complete most of the steps on the previous slide. So it gets even more complex. And unless people like the UK government or different organizations produce these nice services infrastructure for this type of thing now, and we can eliminate most of the time and cost and cost of organizations building these applications so far. And I'll stop there because I think I've gone over time.
Well, look, Thank you very much indeed. And I think what you've kind of really highlighted is that the real need for standards. And I know that when the British Standards Institute has presented at the all-party group previously, that it's something that they find is very important. And I think you're also noting that private sector has a critical role in that, but I think also the state sector will see an avenue for them as well. We are running just slightly behind, so if you forgive me, I'll now move on to what was supposed to be Catherine Mulligan of the Imperial College. Very sorry to say that Catherine has not been able to join us tonight, but I'm very grateful that Adi Ben-Ari has been able to join us and to welcome him. And the founder and the CEO of Applied Blockchain. He's had over 20 years experience in software, keynote speaking at major industry conferences and presentations. And Adi has co-invented and designed a number of patents related to confidential computing, cryptography, blockchain, and mobile payments. Adi, without further ado, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to step in, and hopefully I can add a bit of value here with just some viewpoints from experience, having worked in the space for a while. I think I've got some quite different opinions to the previous speaker, so let me just get straight to it. First of all, I'm going to start with blockchain. What is it good for? And this is the 17th APPG on blockchain, so I think the subjects in general has been covered many times, I'm sure, but it really depends what you're putting into a blockchain as to how scalable it's going to be, and also how interoperable it is. So there is a question about what you're using it for. And over the last 5 or 6 years that we've been building these solutions, we've learned that it's not really a great place to put data. Okay, so blockchain for us is really about group security of historical transactions. And it's basically having a group guard the history of transactions and the history of data, more so than a single party. And that's what it boils down to. Everything else is built on top of that. And that's why it has these properties of immutability. It's great for records of ownership, where we have things at stake, and we prefer a group to look after that than maybe a single party. What it's not very good for is storing data. And the reason is because these are distributed systems, so we're taking a database and we're replicating it. And so an attacker now has multiple targets instead of one target. So it's really not a great place to put data. And it's not a technology for data privacy. And it's not a technology for parties to share data through. And unfortunately, we see this quite a lot, but we don't think this is what it's for, or this is what it's good at. And so I guess with that in mind, I'm going to look at a bit more detail at interoperability and scalability. So in terms of scalability, we have the public blockchains, which through their rather heavy consensus requirements being open, they're particularly slow at the moment. There are obviously some innovations around that, and we heard about one specifically earlier here. But in general, what we see in industry is that we close a group, and then if we know the parties that we're dealing with because they're in a trusted group, then we can have a lighter consensus, which already makes things quicker. And the other thing that was added in enterprise blockchains for privacy was that we had these closed off groups between almost pairs of parties. And then we have very little consensus because we've got very little blockchains with very few parties in them. And so then consensus can be very quick. But we think it's a little bit of a trade-off, because if the very reason we're using these ledgers in the first place is for group security, then making these groups minuscule and pairs of parties and so on really undermines the very advantages of using a blockchain in the first place. So, what are the solutions? So first of all, we think that we should minimize what we put on a chain and what we use it for. If it's really for group security of historical records, then we should use it just for that. We should use it for records of ownership where the value of those records of ownership is high. And we shouldn't put lots of data on there and throw all our business processes inside and so on, because there are far more efficient technologies available for doing that. And the blockchain isn't necessary. So if we minimize what we put on a blockchain, we find that they're much more scalable. The second trend that we're seeing is that is this technology called roll-ups, which basically means let's do more outside the chain. And that also helps with privacy, which I know isn't the subject of the talk today, but is another topic that kind of rolls into this. And so if we prepare things using cryptography outside the chain, and then we just put evidence into the blockchain itself, then what goes into the blockchain is lighter, and therefore the whole solution can be more scalable. It can even be more interoperable, and I'll talk to that in a minute. So I think this was described by some of the other speakers. What we have right now is we have a soup of different platforms covering different aspects of life cycles of sometimes the same assets. Then we have supply chains for certain products. We have financing networks for financing the development, the production of those same products. We have insurance networks for insuring those very products. And none of these things are connected, and they're all on different technology platforms that don't work with each other. So we have this evolving commercial space, which is challenging. This was a presentation by a bank I saw a while ago, just for the projects they're involved in, and you can see how they're all developed on different platforms and not really designed to talk to each other at all. So we do have a problem here. And then in looking to try to solve the problem, well, we have very incompatible technology platforms. The different blockchains are fundamentally built using different technology. So they're not designed to talk to each other, and they're very, very different. If we're looking to solve a data problem, and I've seen many, and we've been involved in standards bodies trying to standardize data. Again, I think that the blockchain isn't the place for data. So I don't think it's the data itself that necessarily needs to be standardized. It's the evidence about that data that's required in a blockchain that we need to focus on. And that might make things much simpler. Then if we're dealing with assets and tokens, interoperability doesn't just mean moving a record around as it would with data. It means we have to appreciate that wherever we move this asset or token to is now the current master record for ownership of that asset. And so that kind of movement is now very different to just moving a bit of data or copying a bit of data from one blockchain to another. So that's a more challenging problem. And there are a bunch of technical solutions out there for that. The next category is historical provenance. So we've got ownership records, but we might also want to know or to be able to validate properties of the history of a certain asset. So is it a green asset? Was it produced by a certain manufacturer? Was it produced in a certain way? Do we have some evidence about its history? And again, we want to express those in a way that we can verify, but again, we can scale. So we don't need a lot of data, and we probably want them to be privacy preserving as well, because we don't want to give away commercially sensitive information. So that's another problem space. And then finally, identity, which I'm sure has been talked about in other meetings. And there's a range of solutions out there, bridges and bridging networks, if you don't want to trust one bridge. And there's even enclaves now, which provide another method of being able to witness and validate things. And there are some standard groups. We think the most important are the technology agnostic groups that focus on things like identity, like the DID standard. And we can then overlay those onto any blockchain solution, or maybe even non-blockchain solution. We did a bit of work ourselves, a bit of research using zero-knowledge proofs, which is an advanced form of cryptography, where we developed assets that we could deploy to different types of blockchains. We used Ethereum and Hyperledger Fabric, and we could move those assets across because they were not expressed in the technology of the blockchain, they were expressed just using cryptography. So as long as we have the mass libraries available on different blockchains to verify these, we can just move them around. So that's one path to some kind of interoperability. Recommendations that we would make is the government should really stay away from specific technologies. The most important thing is for government, for the data the government holds and wants to expose digitally, this should be in the form of digitally signed data, so that we have provenance and proof of the authenticity of the data. That's nothing to do with blockchain, that's just cryptography. But blockchains can consume that, and smart contracts can build logic around that. So the government just needs to provide something using standard cryptography that can then be consumed by any type of blockchain, any type of blockchain application. And that we think will provide huge value for very little cost and risk. and is also, doesn't hinder scalability and doesn't hinder and is interoperable as well. The digital identity and attributes trust framework was mentioned. This looks like a really good step forward. So I think these types of steps are really something that we support. That was it.
Ari, thanks so much, and also thank you for stepping into the breach to replace our other speaker. We're really grateful for that, and you definitely highlighted some issues around security of data, the archiving, the archive element of a transaction and minimization. And I've got to admit, as a policymaker, reducing consumption for me is an issue which I think is very important. And that kind of minimization element you mentioned, I think will come more to the fore in the very near future. Let's power ahead, because for our final speaker, Pēteris Zilgalvis, who's the head of unit for digital innovation at the European Commission, comes from originally from a part of the world that I love indeed, from Latvia and the Baltic. And I always say that small things and small nations are always the best when it comes as a surprise to anybody on here tonight. He's a kind of head of the unit for digital innovation and blockchain, the digital single market directorate, and co-chair of the European Commission FinTech Task Force, and was visiting European Union fellow at St Anthony's College at University of Oxford in 2013 to 14. An upcoming publication is The Law and Political Economy of Decentralized Digital Ecosystems. And he also has a BA in political science, just like myself. So absolutely delighted to welcome you here tonight, sir, and we'll hand over to you in Brussels.
Thank you very much for the very nice invitation, and it's always nice to see the friends from Wales, England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. A little bit less these days, but I think we can continue to work together in our areas of common interest. Among others, the climate change was mentioned, and that is also a part of our ambitions for blockchain in the EU, to have sustainable blockchain. So the very beginning goes back not quite at the start, but it's was an early part when I was in the virtual currencies working group at the University of Oxford when I was a visiting fellow back in 2013. And we later set up the FinTech Task Force, which was mentioned. I'm still the co-chair of that issued the FinTech Action Plan in 2018. A part of it was a European blockchain initiative. What is this? And for several years, it fully implicated the UK until the recent changes. We have a EU Blockchain Observatory and Forum, which is kind of the think tank, collecting information, projects, issuing in-depth reports. A recent analysis was on the energy consumption of blockchain. So the very obvious high energy consumption of Bitcoin and other proof of work, but also even where we have proof of stake, proof of authority, Byzantine fault tolerance. I mean, there's more that we can do, as all digital technologies can do, to become greener. We had a recent workshop on central bank digital currencies with the Bank of Canada and the Bank of Japan, along with the European Central Bank. And we are issuing a report now on central bank digital currencies, and have a workshop coming up, which are open now. They're virtual like everything else. They're open to everyone. So very, very happy to see people from the UK as other parts of the world. We have one coming up on the 2nd of March on the European blockchain ecosystem. So we would be glad to see you there. Then we have the European Blockchain Partnership, which is now 29 countries. It has all 27 EU member states and Norway and Liechtenstein, building a European blockchain services infrastructure. And this is not piloting, this is deployment. This year, we plan to deploy the first use cases, which are self-sovereign identity, giving the citizen control over his or her identity. This is a complement to the classic e-identity issued by at least EU states. I know a little bit that the debate in Britain that has taken place over some years, but this complement of the identity that you can manage It's your identity on the internet, other credentials that you might want to put together. We also have diplomas. We support, obviously, students and academics studying and working across borders, as well as people in the midst of their career. And this is intended to help them, not having to, how to say, even carry a physical diploma to show it or send scans and then get verifications from universities. Also, audit document certification, transparency, and time stamping of documents such as audit documents is another strength that we see of blockchain. And then finally, RegTech, regulatory reporting, where we see this as a more efficient and transparent way for the regulated entities to deal with the requirements of reporting and for the supervisory authorities to get information more quickly. We'll be moving on to use cases in small and medium enterprise bonds, financing for SMEs, asylum procedures, and the European Social Security card. These use cases are all starting right now. We have international cooperation with Canada and Australia, particularly in the EID, and are looking forward to working more with other international partners, for instance, in the G20 context coming up. Then we look at the legal framework, where we intend to have a very clear legal framework for a flourishing private sector blockchain in Europe. And these are the markets in crypto assets, which brings in the utility tokens, the so-called stable coins into the fold, along with security tokens, which stay covered by MiFID, which many listeners may know. And this is a risk-based proportional approach. So where there is the least risk, there is a lighter regime, just having to issue either a white paper, which just needs to be not rejected in order to get passporting across all 27 EU member states, or for under €1 million ICOs, not even having to have the white paper, but still being able to passport. And then, of course, for a globally significant asset reference token, Facebook, Libra, Diem, possibly in the near future, then there is a supervisory mechanism at the European level because of the high level of impact. A couple of previous speakers mentioned in the standardization area, ISO Technical Committee 307. My unit is the one that represents the European Commission there. This is an important tool for interoperability. Obviously, also in Europe, ETSI and Senelec on the relevant applications. ID, self-sovereign ID is one of them. Again, on the legal framework, we'll be coming up with a new regulatory proposal on EU EID. Self-sovereign identity will be a part of it. And in the upcoming Data Act, we look to have some text on smart contracts in order to ensure that they are not fragmented across the digital single market, and they can be utilized as either legally binding or just as software on the blockchain, but without having to have different registration requirements or different ways of being authorized or being utilized. We're also investing in research and innovation and skills. Both basic digital skills as well as advanced digital skills are identified as areas that Europe has strengths in, but can improve in. So we put this very much as an important area to work in, obviously also with our international partners. And then finally, we're working with the private stakeholder community. So with the International Association of Trusted Blockchain Applications, which is international, not simply European at all. And they are also working in areas like standards and interoperability from the side of the private sector stakeholders. And the European Commission right now is a co-chair of its governmental advisory board. And one of the areas we're looking at is standardization and interoperability. A lot was said about interoperability and scaling by the previous speakers. For us, it's a core part of our public services infrastructure. And still we are looking together with the partners exactly which kind of interoperability between the blockchains themselves, between the tokens, some of the issues that were mentioned. And it's to some extent an exploratory mechanism, even while we're implementing, to have the right level of interoperability, like in the areas of the internet and so on. It is not worth the resources to try to make absolutely everything interoperable. And in some cases, for security reasons, it's good that a certain part of blockchain or a certain part of the internet is not interoperable with obviously everything. But we see the international standardization fora in NATPA, as well as the political discussions, and that'll be my final word. I'm participating in the G7 discussions on standards, which are much broader than blockchain under the UK presidency. We have a meeting coming up next week, but blockchain is among the areas that we're looking at, and we do want to ensure that the values and approach of what we could call democratic countries, those in the OECD, the G7, and the European Union, and obviously not only, and the UK, are taken into account in technologies that could have an aspect perhaps used for surveillance and for other uses that should be in a system of rule of law, confined to lawful uses and not utilized in a way that reduces the freedom of citizens. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm very happy to take part in the panel discussion and questions that come afterwards.
So we're going to go straight to the chat. One of the attendees is asking about different types of blockchains. Permission chains for mainstream economy of Hyperledger and Quorum are different from permissionless. Policy implications for either are very different. I take it most folk would probably agree. There's other questions on why are we pursuing interoperability, especially in relation to permissionless blockchains. Would anybody want to tackle that one?
Yes, I mean, I think there's initiatives that are also being undertaken between at least some of the permissioned and permissionless blockchains. I mean, I understand between various actors on Ethereum and Hyperledger Fabric. And I mean, I think some of us do see blockchain, distributed ledger technologies in various levels of decentralization as the basis for a more democratic, a more decentralized Web3 or next generation internet. So again, just as for the internet, you don't necessarily want that every health database is interoperable and open to everything else. You do want to have, to some extent, some walled gardens, and perhaps not every blockchain application or every blockchain, especially perhaps tiny ones, it's not worth the resources try to ensure that they do have interoperability. But we do see this as something that is a broader movement. It is the decentralized element, the individual importance of the citizen. And this is something that can be taken forward. And perhaps a last comment, because you raised it, you have, I think, with the blockchains and the distributed ledger technologies, a spectrum of decentralization from a perhaps theoretical, completely decentralized to an almost theoretical centralized. And in between, you have things like our initiative, the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure. We'll have nodes in the 29 countries, at least. There's already 30 nodes now. Then it will go to the municipal level, the regional level. It'll be permissioned, but it'll have as many as 1,000 or thousands of nodes. So for a cross-border government initiative, very decentralized. And it's the same, I think, with some of the permission DLTs, for instance, supply chain and so on, compared to Bitcoin. It's not as decentralized, but this is actually for a set of private economic actors, very decentralized, very much an ecosystem working together in many cases for more efficiency or for the good of consumers, the good of citizens. You think of the things like the conflict diamonds, climate change, that are also in the interests of the whole society as well as private actors. So I think especially as we move into these kinds of supply chain, climate change, provenance areas of application of blockchain, the need for interoperability will come to the fore, but resources have to be invested really in the areas where it is precisely needed.
Thank you. I know that Tyler wanted to come in, and then I'll go to Petko and then back to Navin.
Thanks. I think actually Pēteris has mentioned a couple of the points there. So the differences between a permissionless blockchain like Ethereum and some of the considerations there versus a Hyperledger enterprise blockchain system, which may be deployed in a completely different manner, designed to manage different processes. The requirements and the ways that interoperability are managed there, they differ, and I think we anticipate that, we expect that, and I think certainly within the permissioned environments, we see interoperability solutions that the solutions that don't need to be fully trustless, where you may have a trusted party or a piece of sort of semi-trusted software providing a bridge. Well, actually, in a small enough environment, that may well be okay. But I think the point is we see a variety of solutions. And I know there was another question on is there a current standard, or what are the current standards being introduced for interoperability? And I think just to sort of underscore my answer there, there is no single standard. There are a very broad array of bodies working on the key questions. And they range from some of the technology-focused groups, and the ISO groups have been referenced already, but right through to industry-focused groups that are looking at, for instance, in the automobile industry, what are the challenges that are faced when we're talking about connecting vehicles to ledgers and that sort of thing, and how to solve some of those challenges in a much more sort of industry-specific way.
Thank you, Tom. Before I come to Petko, I know that Luke and Navin as panelists who had wanted to come in on that question as well. So forgive me, Petko, for a wee minute if I'll come to Luke first and then Navin.
Okay, yeah, just had a couple more points to add. Interoperability in our mind is absolute necessity. The horse is already bolted. We have different applications and technologies already deployed. Iris herself mentions some use cases here, the wrapper tokens, the stable coins. These are a type of interoperability, but they don't provide access to the underlying technology. They're just a wrapper token, for instance. If you put Bitcoin and Ethereum, you're only providing access to the cryptocurrency, not the underlying technology underneath. So for that reason, you will still need to establish technical connections to multiple technologies. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Navin.
Oh, yeah. Interoperability, I keep saying it's a massive buzzword, and it can mean multiple things. But in this case, I think Adi said it very well. There's certain levels of interoperability you need because business processes require it. For something like identity, if every different DLT implements a different identity standard, you're going to have chaos and nothing's going to work. And although every DLT would like to think that it's the one that's going to win, the reality is businesses are going to choose different things for their different needs. So when it comes to business processes, you're going to have standardization of data structures and other stuff just so businesses can interact with them. And I think that's needed regardless. There's another issue of, okay, if one chain wants to interoperate with everything, like sending tokens, that's a different issue. And I think even there is some good in having a global standard. So if you said, just like Web3, all of these things is, once you establish a standard, rather than 100 people building 100 different versions, you can choose to build that if you want. You can choose to build your own because you think it's better. But if you want to work with others and other DLTs, at least you have a common framework with which you work in. And you know that if I build it a certain way, then I can work with other people. And that's what I say. It's like, yeah, give people the choice to do it. But I think you'll find more and more people will choose the interoperable standard because it brings them a bigger audience.
Indeed. And I don't know, Adi, do you want to come in at all?
It's an interesting question. I think that the public blockchains, I think that they're super interesting in the sense that they're very lean. They're doing the minimum that they really have to in order to solve the problems. And in many ways, they're way ahead. So there is interoperability in the public blockchains for different tokens to be exchanged. Again, there are some solutions for exchanging tokens across different platforms. And those have to be super secure because people are trusting their highly valued digital assets with those solutions. So they have to work, they have to be in place, and all they do is move the digital assets around because that's all they need. So I think it's great to look into the public blockchain and see how things are being done there already. The second thing I'd add, there is a bit of a movement, even in the enterprise space, to start to do things on public blockchains in a very privacy-preserving way. So it's, you know, it's something else just to bear in mind. Again, in terms of interoperability, scalability, and so on, it has implications on that, but it's interesting to look at.
Thank you, Petko. Over to you.
Thank you, Martin. A very quick question to probably first to Pēteris. Good to see you here, and probably to Luke and the rest of the panelists. My question is about the European Blockchain Partnership and the European Blockchain Service Infrastructure. Now, obviously, UK cannot be outside of such connectivity. So, is it open for like a 30th member of a European Blockchain Service Infrastructure? And that's the first question. Is it open for like the UK national blockchain system to be kind of connected, a network to be connected to EBSI, and probably to look, how would this look from a technical perspective? Thank you.
Okay, I mean, actually, we were 30, and this was a sad moment in my life, honestly, when we had to go through the different websites in various places to move it from 30 to 29. Right now, by the rules of the ministerial declarations, which we set up through something called Digital Day, it's European Union and European Economic Area and EFTA. We are already starting cooperation. I mentioned targeted cooperation on self-sovereign identity, first of all with Canada, and then probably also to Australia in the very near future. So this kind of cooperation could start with the UK. I will not comment on you joining EFTA and the EEA. That would make it very easy, but this is a political issue far above, my areas of responsibility. But I mean, obviously, you're our neighbors. You are one of the original partners. We will look for ways to cooperate, just as with Canada and Australia, and maybe soon with Japan and the United States, with you as well. But if it's not in the EU, EEA, EFTA category of cooperation, then it's more the targeted international cooperation. I mean, in the end, we see this as a seamless technology, that if all our dreams came true, this would be the layer of Web3 of the next generation internet that started in Europe and then linked up to systems in other parts of the world, offering both public services as well as linking to the many great private initiatives out there. So it's probably the next months and years that are maybe a little bit more complicated, but eventually we really do want to see this as a decentralized ecosystem that is open to the world. But I did underline, we want it to be sustainable. We want it to be a green set of blockchains, and also ideally to keep a lack of surveillance, perhaps, I mean, not that's not sanctioned by courts or by, special targeted actions of the state. So really a democratic and decentralized system.
Yeah, Luke, you want to come in?
Yeah, jumping in. So I think we have to be realistic. I think the UK, as it is, will probably or find it very difficult to establish nodes on the EU blockchain with the same permissions as the member states of the EU. So yeah, we can move and focus more on a UK national blockchain services infrastructure. We could have it set up similarly, like where the different nations of the UK are running a node, the different regions are running a node with different permission levels. We could similarly bring on board companies for read-only nodes and things like that. And all these different nodes that are on the network, they can also provide an API interface. So you get there doesn't necessarily have to be one central point where you hit to get access to the network. You could have an entrance in Glasgow. You can have an entrance in London, anything like that. And maybe once we establish our own national blockchain services, then you can come possibly to some agreement. We would have a national blockchain services, the EU would have a multinational one. Maybe there could be read nodes on either, and you could start to see how that would help with possible trade applications and things like that. That's my 2 cents on that topic.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting for myself as a parliamentarian to take your question, Pēteris. I think it would be remiss of me if not to come in, having campaigned to remain within the European Union, have a constituency which voted also to remain within the European Union, as well as a constituent nation of the UK, which did so as well. Building on Luke's point, my concern is that, you know, replacing 500 million citizens with just 60 is not either good, sound economic or social or digital or connectivity. It doesn't make sense from my perspective as an individual parliamentarian, and I think it is concerning that if you're in EFTA, which the UK could have become a part of, but clearly neither Norway or the other members of EFTA wanted the UK because it would be a big beast in a kind of a medium European size framework. It has many challenges, but you know, there does seem to be a substantial loss. And the fact that the European Commission is moving on with both Australia, notably, and Canada, while the UK says it's trying to have that global reach with those 2 Commonwealth states, I think, and I don't think there can be disagreement that, you know, that kind of pales into insignificance for the UK, and that we're going to come far down the pecking order. But I had a question from Panagiotis Ketidis, who was wanting to ask, and I think it's a very good one building on that, are blockchain and DLTs a priority for the recovery of the European Union, and are there targets and a roadmap to achieving them? And I'm afraid, Pēteris, that might actually come back to you, seeing as you're actually in Brussels.
Glad to, but I'll try to be brief because we want to hear from other people as well. Yes, definitely. We are working right now on the recovery and resilience plans with the member states. This is 750 billion for the recovery, and 20% of this is flagged to go for digital investments. And we are saying in our dialogue with the member states that they should look at not only how to say just national digital investments, but they should look at the so-called multi-country projects, which include the European Cloud Federation, Gaia-X, which include the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, 5G across borders. And we're in the midst of this discussion right now. There's some member states who have been very vocally supportive, and others that are still trying to decide in their own internal political procedures what their priorities are going to be. And hopefully that blockchain, along with artificial intelligence and some of the other key technologies, will be a part of the plans.
Thank you. I know we're just about to run out of time, and I'm just wondering if any of the other panelists have any kind of final thoughts at all before we round up. All quiet on the Western Front. I'm glad to hear it for a change. Before we wind up, though, I'd like to maybe hand back to Birgitte just for a final comment.
Thank you very much. I can understand why people are quiet. You know, we're totally blown away with information. I certainly learned a lot tonight. So what I think really the striking takeaways for me is that really about interoperability and scalability is really not about the technology. It's about all the features of the technology. It's about the governance. It's about the data governance. It's about the smart contracts, the features of the system, the storage limitations of the system, the consortium network, actually what's on the system and which industry the system is, but it's also what's outside the system. And of course, it's not about the data, but it's all the evidence and environment surrounding the data, behind the data, that needs to be harmonized and standardized. And of course, international collaboration is very key here. So there's so many aspects I think we from policy and regulation need to consider. And it's almost everything here has nothing to do with the technology, but is actually about the environment around the technology. So that's why we're all blown away, because I feel like the different presentations laid it out so nicely. They didn't all agree either, which was really interesting. So there is a lot for us to continue with, and I'm sure that there could be several meetings on this here, and I look forward to watch back the video afterwards. So I certainly learned a lot, and I think it was a great meeting.
Thank you, Birgitte. And as the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Blockchain, I just first of all thank you and your team for all the work that you're doing behind the scenes, especially at this time during a global pandemic, and taking us out of Parliament and taking us virtually. And to all of our speakers this evening for a huge challenging environment in which we're all living in, the opportunities that distributed ledger technology still offers us, and the way in which we can work across business, the public sector, the private sector, and a whole range of options for interoperability, and the technology has to bring to that and to improve the way in which we live. And I think for Pēteris, just in terms of those as a parliamentarian, in terms of the issues around democratization and how we in the democratic states, I hate using the terminology the Western world because I'm afraid that is gone, it's about democratic states utilizing new technology to defend those principles which we all share and will continue to share in the years ahead. So to everyone out there, stay safe. We're about to turn a corner with the pandemic. Take care of yourselves, and hopefully we will see you soon at the next All-Party Parliamentary Group meeting. Thanks very much, everyone, and good night, and stay safe wherever you are.
Thank you very much. Bye.